Hey folks, today we're going to have an interesting discussion around how to prepare for the post-AGI and the post-ASI world. How to best position yourself for achieving the best outcomes, for at least maximizing the odds of those outcomes in the face of these rapid, massive changes that are ahead of us. So without further ado, let's dive right in. I want to start us off with a bit of a personal context. For the first time in my life, probably in the entirety of my life, I'm feeling this undercurrent of, I guess I can call it an anxiety. It's sort of an anxiety, not the kind that most people would associate with the way they feel in their bodies and their minds when they feel this anxiety. But this is a different, I'd call it more like an intellectual anxiety. As subconsciously I start internalizing the pace of change. No one in our history has ever lived through the pace of change that we are living through. Everything is becoming outdated, obsolete, at a rapid pace. The world that we lived in 3 years ago, that world doesn't exist anymore. In the world that we're going to find ourselves 3 years in the future, that world is going to look so different to the world. The gap is only going to increase with every passing year. And it becomes incumbent upon us, it becomes imperative for us to start preparing ourselves cognitively, mentally, emotionally, physically, in terms of our relationships, in terms of setting down the foundations for our finances, and all sorts of things which are relevant to build a good life, basically. Because there's a tsunami coming, and if you don't prepare for it, it is going to wipe you away. And that's why I felt that this is a good time to verbalize and get some of the thoughts that have been brewing around in my mind for the longest time now, for at least a couple of years, to get them out into the world and hope that they are useful for some people who might see this. So with that intention, let's start right in. This undercurrent, to dig a bit deeper, comes from certain facets of this change. One is the sheer variance. There was no technology, there was no change in our history, not just in our era, but no change in our history that had such a sheer range of possible outcomes, right? We can imagine an extinction, we can imagine tons of extinction outcomes or dystopian outcomes where we stay on this planet and we are still conscious, but we see horrible techno-feudalism, AGI takeover, all sorts of crazy outcomes that we don't want to go towards. And on the other hand, we can imagine beautiful utopian outcomes with paradise for all of us. And the crazy thing about the nature of this technology, at least the intellectual understanding that our species has of this technology, is that the extreme outcomes tend to be a bit more likely than the median outcomes, which wasn't the case for all of the previous technological revolutions. And associated with this is the uncertainty. We simply cannot model this is singularity concept. We haven't quite hit singularity yet, but we kind of have. Right, there's no moment where prediction becomes impossible, because prediction is kind of impossible at this very moment. It always has been impossible because we live in a chaotic world where small changes can lead to radically divergent outcomes. But this time around, with AGI, with ASI, with conscious systems that can achieve the goals that emerge in their own minds, everything is up for debate, everything is up for discussion, everything is up for renewal and change. And that's the world that we are heading towards. The sheer uncertainty that we have in front of us is something that we got to get to grips with, because humans haven't just taken a step back. For most of our history, for 99.99% of our history, most people could have expected that the world of 50 years ahead is going to look like the world of today, right? In terms of massive changes, like sure, they could have been invaded, stuff like that, but the bare bones reality of the life wouldn't have changed. And this has started flipping, and it's flipping at a faster and faster. This model has started flipping at a faster and faster rate, where we don't even imagine, for example, like 50 years in the future, we might not even have a biological basis. Many of us might not even have a biological basis, right? We will not even be embodied beings. And there's such a radical departure from our species base paradigm, that it's impossible to model what such a human mind could be, right? There are so many different facets of existence where, again, it becomes almost impossible to model. And that's, again, the world that we're heading towards. And with that backdrop, the most important question of our time apart from solving alignment, apart from that sort of question, becomes how do you prepare ourselves both individually and societally? The latter one we're going to pick in another conversation, otherwise this would be like a 3 hour conversation. I don't want it to be that long. So today we're just going to talk about how can you, as a person who's got their own locus of control, how can you, within that locus of control, do things to maximize your odds of a good life in that post-AGI, post-ASI future. So that's what we're going to explore today. The nature of this plan, as I've designed it, it's not even a plan, it's just a general philosophical approach, is such that even if we don't achieve it, I've got my own timelines, I think that it'll probably hit AGI within a couple of years, and will hit ASI by 2035. Well, not 2035, like that's outdated, by 2029. And yeah, the question then becomes that in light of those facts, and these are by the way, these are very close to the timelines of the people who are building these technologies, the Dario Amadais of the world, the Demis Sabbases of the world, the Sam Altmans of the world. So I'm partially borrowing some of their mental models to come to my own, right? Because I don't know how the soup is being made, so I got to borrow some heuristics from there. And it might take longer, by the way. It might take us 2035 to get to ASI. But the nature of this discussion and some of the points that we're going to explore, some of the, I guess, things that we got to start incorporating are going to be useful regardless of the timelines, right? These are generally useful principles to apply. They become more useful now. They become imperative now. But regardless of this backdrop, a lot of these things that changes a lot of these prescriptions, for lack of a better word, are things that you ought to start incorporating into your life regardless of the timelines. So with that, let's start right in. I want to lay out the landscape. I alluded to this a moment ago. There's the timelines. Most experts used to believe that would take us 100 years, 50 years. 50 years was the median expectation 5 years back to us achieving AGI and maybe never achieving ASI. That wasn't the median. I think the median was, with ASI, was like 10, 15, 20 years after that. Now, with the rate of progress in the last 3-4 years, most of those models have been flipped around, they've been thrown around, they have had to be recalibrated in face of the evidence, the overwhelming evidence. And so now most experts believe, well, the median timeline is 2020, roughly 2025 to 2028 for AGI, and 2026 to 2020, no, I don't think anyone seriously believes 2026 for ASI, 2027 to 2033 for the median expectations for ASI. That's pretty close, in case you didn't know this. That is insanely close. Time really flies by, doesn't it? It's been 5 years since COVID hit. Yeah, chew on that for a moment, mate. So these rapid changes are, well, these moments, the most historic moments are very close to us, right? They're going to flip our economic models, our governance models, our social models, our societal models, everything, even our personal relationships. And everything will have to be rethought, will have to be reimagined in that new world. But, and this is the kind of the difficulty, right? We simply cannot process, we simply cannot be confident about any particular world. I cannot say to you with any level of confidence that the world of 2035 is going to look like this. No one can. Even if you imagine the smartest people on the planet, they are operating in the shroud, in this haze of uncertainty. And for them, actually, the haze of uncertainty is greater than a 99.9th percentile person, because they can see more, right? The range of outcomes in their mind are greater because they can just imagine more and more concretely. And yeah, so again, this goes back to my point about the sheer variance, sheer divergence in the possible outcomes in front of us. And you combine the fact that we're really bad, humans, our species has been really bad at exponential thinking for obvious reasons. We never had to think exponentially. And couple all of these, and you got a mixture where if we don't proactively start working out a model of how to live in that new world, we are going to be in for a rude awakening, for a reckoning. It's going to be ugly, right? So we want a minute. There's going to be a pain for everyone except for the super powerful, the billionaires, the ultra billionaires, hyper billionaires. Except for there's going to be pain for everyone. What we want to do is minimize the pain. What we want to do is maximize the odds of us having a good life beyond that moment of transition to the post AGI order, beyond the transition to the post ASI order. And so what becomes most important in that world are your skills. I don't mean your hard skills. I don't mean the skills that have become commodities. I mean your very unique human skills, your meta skills of how well you can learn things, and your willingness, your curiosity to want to learn things. Focusing on adaptability, because things are going to move fast and they're not going to settle. They might settle 30, 40, 50 years in the future. Even then, there will be some things which will settle, but apart from that, there will be many things which will continue to grow exponentially, and they'll have knock-on effects on the rest of the society. And so, one of the core skills that you got to start developing is adaptability, is being able to actually look at the world critically and understanding what's happening, how can you best position yourself in light of that. Creativity. Because again, in light of that changing world, there are going to be opportunities that are going to emerge, there are going to be opportunities which will have closed down, there will be arbitrages, there will be ways to build a better life in that new world, and all of that will require a base level of creativity. And emotional intelligence, which is the most human thing there is, and will be the most human thing we'll have for at least a few decades. Maybe not a few decades, but at least like 1 decade. Well, not even. I don't think so, because I'm actually working on that, on artificial emotional intelligence, but we'll talk about that in another conversation. But anyways, the point is that because we are biased towards humans, because we are biased towards people in our lives and humans in general, we'll want to engage with humans, we'll want to build businesses with humans, we'll want to engage with human businesses. Hopefully, this stays true, because that's the world that I'm actually going to want to build. Actually, am building, as a matter of fact. I'm not going to want to have a one-person billion-dollar company. That just doesn't make any sense to me on a human level, right? You want to have fun with people. You want to work with mission-aligned, values-aligned people. That's where the whole experience of humanity, actually, for example, your partner, your friends, your family, all of that, right? The beauty of all of these things lie in shared experiences, shared values, these deep things that connect us at a deep level, right? And emotional intelligence obviously is the substrate for all of that. So working on the emotional intelligence, understanding how to build better relationships is going to be critical. Another super critical thing, and this should be obvious, I shouldn't probably even talk about this, is learning how to actually work with these AI agents. Being open to that, first of all, and not saying that, you know what, because there are a lot of people, especially people in the younger cohorts, who don't want to adopt these technologies because they believe that these technologies come from evil companies that have used the data of humanity to make insane amounts of profit. And I get the argument. I also sympathize with the argument to some degree, because what these AI companies have done is obviously they were trained on the free data of the internet and build these models, and they're going to accrue a lot of value on the shoulders of people who are not going to be compensated for that. So I get that big time, but pragmatism becomes the name of the game in this changing world, right? You cannot just say that, you know, there are certain ideals that you'd have to shift. You cannot say that I don't want to work with an AI. Sure, you can. I mean, everyone's free to do whatever they want to, and if that fits with your worldview and if that gives you meaning, it's fine. But what you can't do is you can't say that I don't want to work with an AI and I still want to have a prosperous life, right? That's just going to become impossible. So working with AIs, prompt engineering is a very rudimentary way. We're going to get to the point where natural language interfaces are going to be the main modality. So I don't think that this is going to be a specialized skill. I think it's just more of a willingness to want to work with AGIs and incorporate these systems into your life more than some technical aspect of prompt engineering, because I don't think that that's going to become obsolete with AGI. And also learning to emphasize the uniquely human things, right? for example, culture, shared values, human capabilities, empathy, nuance, cultural nuance, all of that. Learning, because in a world where human intelligence becomes a commodity, or intelligence in general becomes a commodity, the uniquely human things become more important. We observe this kind of a meta trend with many technologies in the past, and this is only going to, as with many other trends, it's only going to get hypercharged in the post AGI order. And yeah, connected to what I spoke about a few minutes ago, learning to learn, developing, if that doesn't come naturally to you, developing a deep innate curiosity about how the world is changing, how is it evolving, where is it going towards, and what are is that some things will stay the same. There'll be certain there are fundamental realities, physics, human nature. Human nature is not going to radically change, right? At least not in the short term. So there are certain things that learning about human nature, about just developing the meta skill of learning and being adaptable. That's just going to serve you more than any other skill. Now let's talk about how to prepare yourself for the transition economically, financially. This is again one of those things which is connected to my own personal anxieties, because the way I look at the world, my model is that the opportunity, the window to build significant wealth is closing, and it's closing fast, right? Because the things that allowed someone to go from, let's call it rags to riches, right? Or to go from, let's say, not a serious amount of wealth, or not having any wealth, to building an empire, was intelligence recognizing a gap in the market. Intelligence is a bucket term, the umbrella term, but specifically the ability to identify gaps in the market, substantial gaps in the market, being able to build the right team, being able to, well, first find a good solution for that, then being able to find a good team. Yeah, and most of the people who become rich recently became rich by this model, right? They were able to identify gaps in the market, and they were able to build a solution which was enough to get them to the next stage, which was to build a good team, and then it just gets a flywheel going. And my prediction, I've talked about this in another conversation, this is going to be a big theme of the world that we're building. In a world in which AGIs can problem solve, can identify gaps far more effectively than you, your intelligence becomes a commodity. And so the only mode that you have in that world is capital. And my fear, this is a very deep fear that I have, one of my greatest fears right now, I'm bearing my soul. My greatest fear is that the wealth window, the wealth creation window, where you don't have any real meaningful capital to start with, is closing, and it's closing fast. It could be completely shut within a matter of a year, couple of years. And so I don't have a lot of time. And that, I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, but boy, the burden of that is absolutely crushing in a way. But you gotta deal with it, right? Like, if you, I don't want to make it about myself, this is just a point, right? So if you're the sort of person who wanted to build substantial wealth, which someone like me, then, and if you don't have access to capital, then things are going to, well, two things, right? You're going to have to accelerate your efforts, or you're going to have to give up on that dream. So that's for the people who were planning to build wealth through the business avenue, the startup avenue. And then there are the majority of the populace that, well, doesn't really care about building substantial amounts of wealth. They just want to build enough wealth to live a good life, right? So that's the masses. That's like 99%, more than 99% of the people. For them, this doesn't apply to me. I can't imagine that being me. Okay. But the best way to prepare for that, if you are someone who is so looking forward to working, is to start upskilling in areas that are going to be, eventually everything's going to be automated. In a 50-year time span, I think that there might still be jobs, there'll still be jobs hopefully, but it's difficult to imagine that far into the future. So what you got to do is you got to focus more on the shorter term, the 5 to 10 year horizon, and you got to realize that there'll still be some jobs which will be relevant, obviously relevant to AI. That's still technical, that's still niche. Sales jobs will be relevant because human-to-human connection when it comes to selling is super important. The businesses with the jobs with human connection, nurses, therapy, a lot of those jobs will still be relevant. Actually, they might become more relevant in a world in which people have more leisure, more wealth, well, more money. UBI is going to become a thing soon. Yeah, so there'll be technical jobs because of the adoption of deployment of AGI, AI into the economy at every different level, and so that's going to be probably 5 to 10% of, well, maybe 1 to 10% of the people who might work there. For the majority, though, what you got to do is got to identify the things that are still going to be relevant in the near future, and start focusing more on those. Right, even things like maybe understanding, studying the physical world, mechanics, physics, etc. And for a lot of people, if they are happy with UBI, then my advice would be that don't think about how to prepare yourself financially for that future, right? Because there are a lot of people who choose a path of doing something just for the sake, for the enjoyment that they get out of it. They don't really care about building wealth. They don't really care about having a big house beyond the basic necessities. There are a substantial number of, I don't know about the percentage, but there is a substantial cohort of people who all they care about is making art, right? Or doing science, or the, I don't want to sound judgmental or anything, but another version of this is people who just want to play games throughout the entire day, right? People who just want to watch movies, whatever, right? And those, a substantial number of people will move to that model. So again, I don't want to sound elitist in any way, but what a lot of people are going to choose in the post AGI world when UBI becomes a thing is to actually actively forego work. And it makes sense to choose that path actively, not even have to wait until then, because then you know how to deal with the anxiety, right? You know how to think about, oh, what am I going to do? Well, I know what I'm going to do, because UBI is almost like a foregone conclusion. So it's going to take care of my food, my health, my bills, etc. So I can do the things that I love doing, right? Which is maybe making art, doing scientific research, doing math, or studying just for the joy of it, just for the fun of it, or again, maybe spending most of my time playing games or watching movies or whatever floats your boat, right? So a lot of people are going to choose those two different paths, which are kind of in the same bucket, which is not really worried about economics, the financials of things. They just want to do things that they love, right? Again, one of that is going to be, yeah, I think that point is well made. I need to belabor on it. And then another point that is super important is how to prepare for this transition financially, right? Let's assume that you've got assets, you've got a real estate portfolio, you've got a stock market portfolio. How to prepare for this post ASI world? You want to index more on tech first companies, AI first companies, index more on those kinds of companies. Some companies, well, lots of companies are going to die. There's going to be a lot of pain on every single front, including for companies, even big companies. And if companies are going to be slow in adopting this, and that companies that actually have no scope because their very business model relies on a pre-AGI world, then you probably don't want to be invested in those companies. You also want to, because, and this is super important, we don't know how painful the transition is going to be. UBI might take a while. So what you want to do is you want to have an emergency fund, a substantial emergency fund. You also want to, possibly, this is not possible for everyone, but you want to diversify your income streams, and you want to, related to that, you also want to prepare yourself for that transition period at the level of getting all of the necessary raw materials. Again, that's not going to happen in the next year. At some point, if you got the means, if you got the resources, it makes sense to bunker down for that world, where you get enough food and water and Wi-Fi and language models and all of those things, where you can self-sustain yourself without electricity, without internet, without any cloud-connected LLMs, AIs. You can still function well, right? You and your family and your community, if you're so inclined, and if you got the means. So that'd be another thing that people who can think about it should start thinking about it. Big precedent over here is people, billionaires, right? Sam Altman, he bought a massive place in New Zealand. New Zealand's super popular for billionaires who want to have a backup plan for the apocalypse, for a possible apocalypse event. Mark Zuckerberg, he's got a huge compound. His compound occupies an entirety of a Hawaiian island. So lots of people with the means, they have start thinking more deeply about this. Also in the post-ASI world, post-AGI world, there are certain things, gold and silver being two prominent examples, they'll always hold value, and there are certain things that might not hold as much value, right? Like in that world, your stock market assets might not hold up its value, so you again want to diversify. Beyond the shorter term, talking about the medium term, you want to adopt a post-scarcity thinking. You don't want to be limited by, well, the economic model that we have been operating by since the invention of money, which was a while back, right? It's a very deeply internalized, forget about money, even the bartering system was related to this, where you would give something and you would get something in return. That model is going to be flipped. We might be heading to a world of, hopefully, abundance, where how much you make, all of those questions are going to become irrelevant. So you want to start preparing yourself for that. And if you're the kind of person who's inclined to not chase more wealth, then I think you're going to do pretty well in that world, right? Because all of your basic necessities are going to be fulfilled without you lifting a finger. But more than that, you're going to have the best of all things, right? I wouldn't say luxuries, but you're going to have the best personalized entertainment, movies made just for you. You're going to have books written just for you. You can travel from London to Sydney for a quick party within 30 minutes. Just as you would get on a tube, you can do that, travel as easily. It would actually take this is crazy, but we might be heading to a world where within 10 years, by the way, I mean, in the longer term everything crazy is possible, but within 5 years there's this company which came up, boom, supersonic, and SpaceX is going to make kind of this possible too. We might be heading to a world where it'd take longer for you to travel from Piccadilly Circus to East End than it would take for you to travel from London to Sydney. I mean, bonkers, right? Yeah. So yeah, you must start priming your mind for that post-scarcity world, and you want to reconceptualize value in that world, and even meaning for that matter, because a lot of your meaning of life and sense is attached to the value. So related to this, if your work becomes obsolete, fret not, because there's so much more to look forward to beyond your work. And you can always invent work, right? If you're the kind of person who's curious, who's got a base level of intellectual attributes, then you're going to do great in that world, because you'll have all of the free time to pursue your intellectual passions and drives. Now, let's talk about psychological and philosophical adaptation. And the key thing related to the last section over here, probably one of the more important things for most people, is how to reimagine your identity, right? For a lot of people, the identities are so intractably tied to their work in the world, to the role that they have, to their career, right? All of that's going to be taken away, whether people like it or not. And so I'll need to they'll need to start preparing for having a strong, robust, resilient sense of self and sense of identity, comprehensive, beyond the work that we do in this world, and beyond the value that we get from the work, because you can still continue to do the work. That'll be one of the best things about that world, right? That you'll continue to be able to do the things that you want to do, but you'll be able to do them far more effectively, being able to get a lot more output, not economic output, but everything else, in terms of your satisfaction, fulfillment, joy, etc. And yeah, so it becomes important for us to start preparing ourselves for having this model of self beyond work, identity beyond career. And in that world, again, going back to this, a lot of the meaning that people have, and this is true for me, a lot of the meaning that I have comes from the work I do, and comes from the products I'm about to launch in the world, and what I hope the impact will be in this world. And When that in that new world, forget about me, because hopefully I still have a company that's massively and positively impacting millions of people, if not billions. But if you take the base case, you are the meaning that you get from your work is going to become obsoleted, and you'll have to find new sources of purpose, new sources of fulfillment that remain possible and that are uniquely human, right? Where chess is a good example, where there would have been people before chess where the entire identity was tied to the fact that they were the best on this planet at playing chess. And then we got Stockfish, and then we get Deep Blue, and then we get these other engines, and they are so far superior, right? And similarly, within a few years, well, we already got those actually, we're going to have AIs that are better than us in most areas of life, right? But we would want to start deriving more meaning and more joy and more value of the things that we're uniquely human at, right? That we're unique at, uniquely human at. Another key thing, and another aspect of that psychological adaptation is that in that world, the world around you, your screens, your AIs, your immersive experiences, AR, VR, they're going to be so compelling that you can imagine that reality is going to become all immersive, all compelling, all encompassing. And so you'd have to take active efforts, and you should take active efforts to live in your embodied self, right? Go out, go on walks, go on treks, climb mountains, connect deeply with people in the real world, not just through the digital mediums. Find new people, with new people, make new connections. Maintaining that balance of as compelling as the digital world will be, with all the best personalized entertainment and level of emotion, level of reality, level of detail that would rival reality itself. In the face of that compelling digital world, you'll actually have to fight against the impulse, the natural impulse of just staying in that, and you will want to go out again, meet new people, connect deeply with the friends, with family, and do fun stuff with people in the embodied world, play sports, play soccer, etc. And one of the key things that you could be doing for yourself, one of the greatest things, the greatest acts of service you could be doing for yourself, for your near future self, is to start building psychological resilience, right? Because the world is going to change rapidly, and humans are not primed for that, for even making sense of that change. Even the sheer sense of, like, I'll give you an example, not to make things political, but what Donald Trump is doing in the United States right now, he's just left so many people on the left completely unable to accept the reality, right? That things are changing and things are changing so rapidly. Now, that, and again, I don't want to argue whether it's good or bad, the changes that he's making. It's not a political thing. The point is more about the fact that the people, majority of the population, don't have the psychological adaptation, they don't have the toolkit to be able to make sense and to be able to function effectively and function well in the world of rapid changes. And those changes are only accelerating. So one of the greatest things that you could be doing for yourself is to start priming yourself, to start learning toolkits, start developing internal toolkits for being able to function well in the face of those rapid, massive, unprecedented changes. Now let's move on to the section of social and community preparation. The single most important thing that you could be doing, forget about everything else, is to focus on building the best bonds, the best relationships. It's finding the people and adding them to your circle who are deeply aligned with you, who share the same values, having a robust social circle, family circle, friend circle. And building deep, meaningful bonds, enduring bonds. This is the single most important thing that you could be doing in that world, because even if everything else gets taken away, as long as you've got that love, that connection, that intimacy, that bond, you can handle any change. Love is the thing that transcends oh gosh. My mind goes to Interstellar, right? Where I think the line is that love is the thing that transcends space and time. It's the only thing that can transcend space and time. And obviously that's not true in a literal sense, but I love the message, and I think we can embody that message, and I think it's about time that we start living that message, right? You will become very individualistic, we become very isolated, we become very self-focused, even narcissistic to a large degree, very, yeah, and focusing more on the people in our lives and building great relationships with them, being of service to those people, and deriving more meaning from being of service to those people, and serving and loving those people in a deep way, and focusing on building the best bonds, I think can be the greatest source of meaning and joy for you, for me, for everyone in that world. And not to plug what I'm working on, but I cannot resist, right? Because this is the mission that LNT has. Like, this is what thinking about how the world's going to change, and how the thing that is going to be, or that is going to stay most universal and most timeless rather, our relationships, our bonds. And so if we got some technology and AI that can help us find the best people for us, best fit people, and help us build the best relationships, then that becomes the single most important technology in the entire world. Okay. And you, but jokes aside, well, actually, it was not a joke, right? Like, in that world, our relationships are going to become the most important thing, and the people who you might not have met, but who might end up being the most important people, connecting you with those people becomes the most important thing that we could be doing as a society. So that's what LNT's goal is at its core. And I hope that it achieves that mission at scale for billions of people. Yeah. And then also, beyond your family and your friends, focusing also on your community, right? We live in a society, but focusing on community resilience, talking with your people beyond your immediate social circle around the changes, and building bonds with those people, and just being more open to the idea of being of service to people just beyond your social circle. I think again, for a lot of people, that can become an enduring source of meaning. And religions, by the way, one of the reasons they've been so powerful for so many people is that community aspect. And if you kill God, as we have, then we need to replace God. Well, we need to replace the holes that God filled. We haven't done that, and that's been one of our society's greatest failing. Nietzsche, he warned us of this. We didn't pay heed to his warnings. At our own peril, we have suffered mental health epidemics, loneliness epidemics, lots of issues in the world can directly be tied to the fact that we didn't really think too deeply, or at least the ideas that we had, they didn't become popular for whatever reason, right? We can do an analysis of this in some other conversation. For whatever reason, we couldn't find the right replacement for God. And I contend that deep, meaningful relationships with people in your life, and with yourself for that matter, and meaningful work, and having a sense of purpose, which is detached from any economic value that you might get from it. So, in other words, work that can stand this post-AGI, post-ASI transition, where you can still derive meaning and joy and fulfillment from that work. If you got that, then I think you will. That's your God, right? That fulfills everything that God fulfills. So, yeah, community. This is a connected point, right? Like, also focusing on community, being less selfish, becoming more of service to the people around you, building local support networks, because becoming friendly with your neighbors, because during the transition phase things might become very painful, but things might get ugly. And so if you're well connected with the people in your community, and if you're friendly, then all of you can fight or stand the storm without buckling down. Another aspect which might be relevant is that there'll be some people who simply are not mentally equipped to be able to deal with the kind of changes that we are about to undergo. I refer to people beyond their 50s, people beyond their 60s, for whom this is something that they couldn't have imagined even in science fiction. Actually, in science fiction books, they could have. Actually, they wouldn't have, right? Because science fiction books mostly cover a post-world. They don't cover the transition. This is a very interesting point. Let me make a note of this. Yeah, transitions are not covered by, at least I can't think of too many, any, for that matter, sci-fi works that have covered transition moments, transition periods. They mostly cover a post-world, be it a post-utopian world, partially utopian, because if it's completely post-utopian, then it's not interesting, right? I mean, what are you going to write about in a post-utopian world? How are you going to... There have been certain, according to, I think, Scott Fitzgerald, or was it someone, I think, what was it? Give me a... It was Kurt Vonnegut, who, I think he delivered a lecture about this thing, where most of our, almost all of, probably all of our stories, I don't think all, but most of our stories can be captured by 6 high-level meta story arcs, and all of these need to have conflicts. And in a utopia, by definition, you don't have any conflicts of any sort, right? So you can't create a tension, and that's not going to make, like, sure, it might be interesting on some level because no work has existed of that kind. So yeah, it might not be compelling at the level where it's going to tug at your heartstrings, right? It's going to, yeah, it might not become deeply memorable at the emotional level. It might be interesting at the intellectual level. I think that would be the best way to describe something of that sort. Right, so where were we? Yeah, so there are people who simply cannot imagine the transition that we are about to undergo. Younger people are actually far more equipped to deal with this. There are people who, young people, like kids, who don't know what a world without ChatGPT would look like, right? Yeah, for example, Paul Graham, he is 8-year-old kid, is become very digital native, AI native. And so those people are going to find this transition easier at the psychological level. But you have a duty to the older people. The younger people have a duty to the older people to help them navigate this transition so that the older people don't lose their marbles. Essentially. There's obviously going to be different ways that different groups react to this and respond to this phase transition. Religious groups are going to respond to this differently compared to accelerationists, compared to AI safety people or safety first people. And we can draw insights from each of these to understand better what would be a collective model to deal with the transition. I want to move on to some practical action steps that you can take. One of them is obviously learning enough about AI. You don't have to go into technical deeds, but learning enough about AI and about its possibilities and its pitfalls for that matter to be able to navigate this transition. Because we're all going to have AIs, personal AIs in our lives, and it makes sense for us to not anthropomorphize them. It makes sense for us to not expect things of them that they simply cannot deliver, but also being able to understand, being able to get the most value of these systems and these minds for that matter. So developing the AI literacy is going to be super important, and diversifying your skill set, right? You might have been a tech-focused person, you might have been a hard skills-focused person. In that case, you probably want to start focusing more on your soft skills, you want to start focusing more on your human meta skills, human skills, skills that are less susceptible to automation. You also want to start adopting digital sovereignty practices like data protection, data privacy, and maintaining your own autonomy in that world, in that new world, and not giving yourself up to these algorithms and these AIs that are going to be so compelling that they would try to subsume your free will. So you got to be careful in this new world of maintaining your sense of self, your sense of autonomy, your sense of free will, and also developing your own ethical frameworks around how you want to navigate this new world, right? Because again, a lot of the rules that we've written down, they just are not going to be fit for this. A lot of the principles are, more or less, but we never grappled with a world where we're going to have these minds, we're going to have these, we're going to have money become obsolete, we're going to have our economic value become obsolete, right? So you want to, and this is personal, subjective to everyone, so I'm not going to talk about my own ethical framework over here, but it makes sense to start developing your own ethical framework of how you want to navigate this new world, what principles you want to apply for your own life and with your interactions with the people in your life, the people beyond those people, that the immediate circle, and ASIs and AGIs. Your personal guidelines in a nutshell. And even questioning, because a lot of these things are not inevitable, right? You don't have to adopt a lot of these technologies if you don't want to. So you should also, if you're the sort of person who's perfectly happy without these ASIs and these algorithms taking over your free will, then you can actually choose not to let them take over your life. So again, that could be a part of your personal guidelines. Yeah, but becoming more agentic, right? This is word which has become very popular in the startup circles lately. In a world where skills become commodified, the differentiating factor is agency, right? Is having this belief that I can actually effect changes, I can do things in the world, that I'm not beholden to society, I'm not beholden to algorithms, I'm not beholden to circumstances around me. I've got agency to be able to act on my own free will, right? My own plans, my own intentions. That's, yeah. So having that agency and understanding that, and creating a good model, a good set of personal guidelines about how you want to navigate this world, what are the things that you don't want to put up with, what are the things that you don't want to incorporate in your life, is going to be critical to build a good life, build a fulfilling long-term life. In the long term. I want to end with painting a vision of human flourishing, right? Because this project of AGI and ASI, at its heart, there are a lot of different motivations. A part of those motivations can be greed, can be power accumulation, can be consolidation, can be control, etc. But at the highest level, what we want is the best life possible for everyone, right? I think that can be a consensus goal. That's something that all of us can converge to, most of us can converge towards. Not the Taliban or not the Hamas or whatever, but most people can converge towards that in the longer term, right? A post-abundant, post-suffering, not suffering, like suffering is still good, but not beyond below a certain level. Post-abundant world where people are free to choose the life that they want to design. People are free to design and live the life that they want to have, and they are able to. They're not controlled by having to pay bills, which takes away so much of time, so much of our agency. Imagine if you didn't have to pay bills, if you could do the things that you want to do, because everything basic is taken care of, so you can follow your passions, you can be of service. If you want to preserve biodiversity, if you care about nature, you can devote yourself full time to it. You can devote full time to community activities. You can devote yourself full time to building meaningful connections with the people in your life, be in your communities. You can choose research projects. You can pursue creative collaborations with people just for the joy of it, just for the fun of it. Doesn't matter if you don't even get 10 people to listen into your music or get into your art gallery. Does not matter any of that. All that matters is that you get a deep fulfillment of these things, right? So isn't that the utopia that we want to head to? Sure it is. And these AGIs and having ASIs is good. The main reason we are doing this, or at least the main reason that I'm actively involved in these efforts, and I will be in any serious capacity, is that's the North Star vision for humanity. And they are going to help us build our best lives. They're going to help us actualize our best selves, our potential, in terms of our every single level, be it intellectual, be it mental, be it emotional, be it in terms of our passions, our curiosities, every single level. And they're going to help us become better angels of our nature. They're going to help us become more mindful, become more intentional in the way we build our relationship with our partners, with our spouses, and with our kids and our families and our friends. And in short, they're going to help us actualize our best lives. They're going to help us actualize our best selves. And there can be no nobler goal. There can be no greater ambition than that. They are going to help us augment our humanity. Now, that's the best framing to think about it. Obviously, I'm talking of the best case scenario. We're talking of the upper echelon of these scenarios, but those are quite likely, and I think that's where we're headed. Scenarios where they help us augment our humanity, so replacing us, right? Because we have been replaced in a way by technology. If technology didn't exist, we would still be, oh, if technology didn't improve after the year 10,000 BC, 9,000 BC, 8,000 BC, then all of us, 95% of us, most of us would be tilling, most of us would be engaged in agriculture. Take us back further into the past, and most of us would be engaged in hunting and gathering, right? Now, we've been freed, we've been replaced in a way in those activities, and the world is so much better for it. So replacement of the things that we do is not necessarily bad. And this is something that we'll need to internalize. Many of us will need to internalize that the things that we do, there's a status quo bias, right? That many of us have. But if the alternative is better, then we should be looking forward to it rather than sticking to our guns about the status quo, the current order of the things. The way I think about AI is that it's going to help us augment our humanity, it's going to augment our capabilities and our experiences, make them deeper, make them more meaningful, make them more joyous, more fun-filled, more personalized, more everything good, and make us smarter, make us more capable, make us more mindful, more intentional, more joyous, more loving, kinder. Also want to touch upon new frontiers that we should expect. We don't know the nature of these. Some of these, I guess we can predict, like space colonization, building megastructures in space, geoengineering our planet, geoengineering other planets in our system, and then beyond. But there'll be new frontiers where we'll actually work with these AGIs. And these will be emerging domains. And it will be one of the most enjoyable things of this transition, or of this post-AGI order, right? Working with these super smart systems that understand us deeply, even have empathy, but that we can work with on solving the most challenging problems that move society, move humanity forward, make us spread the flame of consciousness around the cosmos, right? Wouldn't it be fun working with these AGIs, doing that, accomplishing that greatest of goals? And that's the world that we're heading towards. And one last thing I want to touch upon is, from an evolutionary perspective, this was almost inevitable. As long as we were intelligent of a certain threshold. So when I say inevitable, you can imagine thousands of other species around the cosmos, strewn around the cosmos, and if they can get to building computers that can think, then AGI is inevitable, right? And you can think of, for intelligent species, their tech progress is inevitable in certain ways, right? Like, we're always going to, again, I don't know whether we can expect that curiosity is going to be a fundamental attribute of intelligent species. It might be, it might not be. It's likely that it would be, because of natural selection and evolution, some of the principles in evolution are common across species that become intelligent, then curiosity is one of the most fundamental things in getting to and being able to utilize that intelligence. Part of curiosity is intelligence. They are adjacent to each other in the space of attributes, these kinds of attributes. And so if you take a step back, we've been working on building better and better technologies to help us live more deeply, get the most out of life, get more and more out of life. Every single piece of technology that we've built, prominent technology that we've built in the past, what it's allowed us to do is express more of our humanity. It's allowed us to actualize ourselves, to take us all the way back to the wheels, right? Which reduce our physical labor, which allowed us to spend more time doing the things that matter to us, which back in those days was connecting with people, sharing stories, breaking bread, doing simple things, right? And then we invented the next great phase shift would have been with the invention of religion, which placed more prominence of communities. Actually, I think that would have was religion there. The next phase shift would have been with the invention of writing, which allowed these ideas to spread like wildfire, and ideas are one of the things that give us meaning, give us joy, give us enjoyment, and give us so much more. And so once you start spreading ideas, and once you make it easy for ideas to spread, then you're spreading states of mind, not just ideas. You're spreading joy, you're spreading love, you're spreading connection, you're spreading all of the good things that matter, even bad things like Mein Kampf, obviously. But the general trend, right? Technologies can be used for bad or good. I mean, so yeah, you don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but. And then after that, we had the Industrial Revolution, which again allowed us to get a lot more bang out of our buck, which allowed us to spend more time in the arts and in the doing things like actually Industrial Revolution wasn't that great for the majority. It was great for people at the top 20% of people. Actually, it was great for even the majority and the longest span of time, right? So when I was saying of the Industrial Revolution, I was saying about the workers in Birmingham and London in the late 19th century, and the living conditions were absolutely appalling. But in the longest span of time, with with the democratization of technology, like think about now, right? Like everyone's got this device in the pocket that can do anything, that can connect them with anyone, that can give them access to any piece of knowledge that they might want, that can help them watch any movie, listen to any piece of music that they would want, right? So technology has got this trend where it allows us to express more of our humanity and allows us to get more of what we want out of life. And AGI is going to be the ultimate force in that trend, and we should welcome it. And then, yeah. So I think we should welcome it with open arms and with excitement, not just, yeah. I think that should be it. We've gone over some concrete things. We've also taken a high level view of this transition, and I hope that this has been useful for you. I hope that you're gonna be able to take certain things from this discussion and start doing your own planning on paper. You're gonna start thinking about how to best prepare yourself, who you are with your own unique set of circumstances, your own values, your own things that you want out of life, your own goals and drivers. And yeah, I hope it's been useful. Thanks for the time. I'll catch you soon. Cheers.